Good morning, everyone. It is a Wednesday. It is October the 7th. And it's time for coffee. Uh, Coffee break chat. Coming to you live from Philadelphia on this fine Wednesday morning. So, just figured I'd launch right into a few of the topics that we have today. Try something here. Looks like that didn't change anything. Great. Awesome. So what do we have for you? I messed up the title card this morning, but didn't have time to fix it right there during the beginning of the broadcast. So I'll fix it later and post it on the YouTube thumbnail. But you'll probably see the wrong title card until then, and I apologize. We did have special guest Il Dutz, Martinez Anthony Briggs, in the intervening time since our last coffee talk, and so had a card set up for that and forgot to get rid of the second line there and put the correct second line. It happens. What's going on in the world of violence? We had an incident here in Philadelphia that alarmed many regular everyday people. There was a shooting at the Lowe's home improvement store in South Philadelphia. Very popular, very busy place, especially at 1 p.m. on a Tuesday. So it was alarming for folks. And what I've said on social media is correct. And important, and it's a perspective that you don't often hear from the news, especially. These kind of incidents aren't random. It's not like you're going to be the one walking into a Lowe's and have a gunman come after you, unless you're the type of person that is already subject to gun violence. The majority of people in the world aren't going to have a random gunman come after them. So while sensationalism and gun violence and the amount of people dying in the streets from guns is all very valid and very alarming, it's intentionally alarming. It's designed to get your attention, and it's designed to make you upset so that you watch the news, so that you watch us broadcasters. How are we going to get your attention if you don't like what we're saying? Let me turn up my mic here a little bit. So, it's it can be alarming, and unfortunately, that's the place we live right now. There are a lot of people out in the world who have lost their jobs. They've lost their everyday way of living. They've lost what semblance of normalcy they had before the coronavirus started, before the Trump administration started. When you lose that anchor to normalcy, the automatic reaction for most people is to try and seek an outlet for that anxiety. it creates anxiety, and you need an outlet for that anxiety. Unfortunately, here in America, it's really easy to get a hold of guns, and it's really easy to use guns for a nefarious purpose. Um, the arguments around the Second Amendment, around the availability of guns, around whether or not we could put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak, um, they're all completely valid. There was an incident actually probably a few months ago now, probably not more than 2 years ago, and a bunch of senators were interviewed as to why they were or weren't supporting a particular bill, and it came down to the fact for Republican senators that they were honestly afraid of their constituency. Honestly afraid that if they voted in favor of a particular bill, that their constituency would violently overthrow the government. It is how this particular country was founded. We were founded by a violent overthrow of government, and it's partially how we continue. We have a peaceful overthrow of government every 4 years. Yes, there are some elements of that peaceful overthrow that are questionable as to whether or not there's a continuing ruling class in America. There's some questions around whether it's rigged or it's impossible to get what we need as citizens. But I think that those questions are they're not real questions. They're not legitimate questions. They are questions that come from a place of despair, a place of not having things go your way as you expect, and therefore also a place of privilege. As you get closer and closer to a actual minority opinion, the louder and more distinct your voice becomes in America's governing system. So we've had minority rule for decades. The least amount of voters are represented the most in our government system. There was some very good coverage of this published by Vice on a Netflix series about voting, and it delves into how our voters our representatives are selected, and delves into voting systems and the collection of gerrymandering, the collection of votes, all that. And when you really look at it, we've created a system where the minority has a strong voice for a very good reason. The problem is we've let the wrong minority voice speak the loudest. We've let the minority voice that doesn't represent um, an endangered group, a group suffering at the hands of um, illegal politics, become the loudest thing in the room. So, just as an example, there's a video going around on on YouTube or on Twitter this morning, and the video is of a woman giving testimony at at a public hearing on mask wearing. And she's testifying as to the discrimination that she faces as somebody who doesn't support wearing masks. She faces quote unquote discrimination every time she goes into a public place. She's told to leave or stand back or move aside or whatever. That's only discrimination in as far as it's discriminatory it's discriminatory to make rules. Any rule is discriminatory, so therefore it's discrimination against you for not wanting to follow a rule. One of the best responses I saw was that then it's also discrimination against speeders to give them a ticket for speeding, or discrimination against drunk drivers to try and ask them to give up their keys or take a taxi home. You know, it's obvious to anyone what is happening. I think it's even obvious to the people who represent these opinions that are intentionally make no sense. I think people are honestly trying to intentionally make no sense, and I don't know why that is. I haven't formed a good theory behind why somebody would do that. It's unfortunate and it's tiresome, but it also needs to stop. We need people to participate honestly in democracy and not participate as though the world is out to get them. So that the people who the world is out to get can be represented honestly as well, and can help. Can seek the help that they need. Along with that, this afternoon, Helen Gim and many of the city council members will be sitting in a hearing at 4:30 to listen to residents, protesters, and witnesses of the police response to the protests earlier this year on 676 and in West Philadelphia. Hopefully, the voices of West Philadelphia won't be drowned out. The examples of what happened are egregious, and hopefully one of the results of these hearings will be that the city council does something to bring about change. It's important that these hearings happen, that what happened becomes part of public record, even though people are already trying to obfuscate what happened and trying to push a public narrative that that what happened was justified. there is no justification for kettling. There is no justification for firing any sort of weapon or anti-personnel device into a crowd. Really, there's no justification for it at all, but the justification gets even flimsier and the atrocity gets even bigger when you intentionally push that crowd into a place where they have no escape, and then you start firing an abortifactant gas at them. So, and then to blanket an entire neighborhood in West Philadelphia with the same gas indiscriminately. There's plenty of video evidence. There's plenty of eyewitness evidence. The Philadelphia Police Department drove through a neighborhood and fired canisters of tear gas out of a vehicle, an MRAP, at and in a neighborhood. There was nobody around the MRAP. There was nobody protesting where the MRAP was. They just drove it through a neighborhood and fired it indiscriminately at people. That's unacceptable. It's unacceptable in war. It's unacceptable for one group of citizens, which the police are just regular citizens. They're not military. For one group of citizens to impose their will on another group of citizens in that way. The right to protest is both sacrosanct in our democracy and what created our democracy. So to act as if your form of protest or your voice is more valuable or in some way more necessary than somebody else's is just idiotic. We need new words. I run out of words now. There's lots of words that I used to use, that we all used to use, that have histories and creation from places of discrimination and places of prejudice, and it's important to change those words, to change what you use in those instances. I'll bring up one that I bring up a lot online because I see it every now and then, is the word maroon. The Maroons were a wonderful group of people. They were escaped slaves and also Native Americans who got together and did some amazing things for this country at the beginning of the country, and also during the Civil War. So using maroon as a pejorative is in fact racist, and a lot of people don't realize that because Mel Blanc, as the character of Bugs Bunny, popularized using maroon as a pejorative, and it's not. It is not an insult in any sort of way. If you look up the Maroons and the history of the Maroons, you'll find tons of information on how brilliant they were, and so calling somebody a maroon is a compliment, if nothing else, but trying to use it as a pejorative just doesn't work. Anyway, it's just an example. I need new words. I need words that can describe the feelings for... I mean, to call them liars is too little. It's too soft. There needs to be another word for what people who intentionally transform what is reality into something that feeds their narrative or feeds them. That needs to stop. That needs to be called out, and there needs to be a way to call it out without insulting people, without insulting people who it's not intended to insult. I guess. Moving on a little bit, there's also recent calls for an end to gun violence, and I want to pull that back to the beginning of this conversation and talk about how our current economy, our current situation is creating the environment for gun violence that exists. I posted somewhere, I believe on Facebook, a little short opinion about this, but the problem of gun violence isn't unusual. It isn't new. It isn't massively different than it's ever been. If you look at, we're in October. We have the highest gun violence rate since 2007. We're about to match the number of deaths due to gun violence of 2007, and we'll probably surpass it. There's no end to the existential threat to our country, and no end in sight to the economic threat of the federal government and the executive of the federal government throwing a temper tantrum and cutting off all negotiations with regard to funding for our country to continue going. So, as I said there, it's not random. It's not people who don't know each other. People are shooting each other for most of the same reasons that people are protesting, which in reality is the same reason that neo-Nazis feel comfortable marching around right now. Things aren't going to get better unless the country starts doing what it's supposed to do and starts taking care of people's welfare and health. Part of that welfare and health is people's mental health. People are living day to day and are missing opportunities that they were counting on. Birthdays, weddings, fellowship. So missing those things can make anybody upset. If you've ever had somebody you really care about forget that it was your birthday, I'm sure you got upset on that day. If you've ever had anybody forget that if you've had your significant other forget your wedding anniversary, that's even worse, I'm sure. But to miss out on being able to celebrate with your friends, their accomplishments, their daily lives, just missing out on catching up with your friends, is a struggle. It's a struggle for everyone. Missing the opportunities to enrich yourself through whatever work that you would like to do, through economic opportunity, through educational opportunity. those are the things that keep society going, keep society from degenerating into madness, for lack of a better word. Um, and we're missing those things. We're missing them, and there's an old quote that I haven't looked up the actual quote, but I'm gonna do it right now. There is well, okay, so there's the phrase bread and circuses, or bread and games, from Latin, panem et circenses. It's a mnemonic phrase referring to superficial appeasement, and it's attributed to Juvenal, the Roman poet. It's true, though. You can't remove from the system the bread and circuses. It's not just superficial appeasement. It is what keeps people sane. So, unfortunately, we're in a place where the circuses can't get together and the bread is no longer being served. So, are we about to see the downfall of modern America? I don't know. I hope not. I think that there's a lot of work for us to do, and to that end, we should probably work towards providing entertainment and outlet to people's needs. So when I say outlet, obviously I work in the arts. There's a lot of value in the arts as an outlet. There's a lot of social value to the arts. There's a lot of value to the arts in general. We wouldn't be where we are without the arts. There are things that wouldn't get invented without the arts. Really, honestly, nothing would get invented without the arts. But I know that's a hard sell. I know that people don't believe that intrinsically, or refuse to acknowledge that, or fight against that concept. So, well, we need to keep trying. We need to keep putting the arts forward. So there's if you look at the history of my broadcast, across the course of many of these broadcasts, I bring up the fact that the arts economy in Philadelphia is truly essential. It's truly a huge driver of the economy here in Philadelphia. We generate 3,000% return on investment for the city of Philadelphia. So for every dollar that the city government spends on the arts, $300 gets spent in and around the city of Philadelphia on that art that's produced. So just to put it in real world terms, the city of Philadelphia gives a production company like mine $1 towards producing a play, let's say. And I produce that play and I charge $2 for somebody to watch that play for every dollar that the city gave me. And then that person also goes out and spends $20 on dinner. Let's say they bring a date. They spend really probably $50, $60, $70 on dinner. And but in the same vein, let's say it's $5. So now we're up to 8. Had to park $2. So now we're up to 10, and on and on and on. So the money generated from that $1 spent by the city generates $300 in taxable expenditures, which in oddly coincidental terms means that they receive in taxes $1 for every dollar that they spent. So it's not really like they're spending money. At the end of the day, every dollar that the city of Philadelphia expends on art, it gets every dollar back. That's just good sense. If you have a system like that in your city, that the city can spend money on something and generate an equal amount of money in tax revenue from that one expenditure, there's no reason for the city not to take full advantage of that system. It will keep your city going and keep your citizens happy, make everything work nicely. So what the mayor's response to the economic downturn has been is to cut the arts. It's everybody's first thing. When people talk about budgeting for government, they often try and relate it to household budgeting. So what's the first thing that you look at when you're budgeting for your household? Let's say you lost a little bit of money, you lost work hours, let's just say, and unemployment isn't covering the difference, so you're just missing $100 a month from your household budget. What's the first thing you cut? Well, you might not go out to eat as often, or you might cut back on your cable package, or get a lower cost internet package, or find a lower cell phone bill. You're not going to be able to quickly and easily change how much you spend on your mortgage or your rent, so those are fixed costs. You're not going to be able to get out of paying your car loan if you have a car, or how much it costs you to get to and from work if you're a rider of mass transit. So those are fixed costs. What do you need? What else can you cut? The thing is, government isn't a household, and we need to fight against that perception at every turn. Budgeting for government isn't like budgeting for a household. Budgeting for government is budgeting for everyone. It's controlling the amount of money that there is in the system for people to exchange for goods and services. Budgeting for government has very, very, very little to do with debts, deficits, borrowing, any of that. Spending for government is a driver of the economy. So I was on Twitter, and I get a little angry at other Twitter users sometimes, but go into any thread about the Heroes Act and Trump's recent refusal to negotiate any further about a second stimulus package. And you'll see a bunch of people arguing that that's a good decision because he's saving future generations from enormous debt. I'm going to go into this piece of history again for viewers and stick around if you've made it thus far, because this gets pretty interesting. And I'm just gonna roughly talk about it because I don't feel like pulling up the exact details. So this is a paraphrase of the exact truth, but I'm going to do it without numbers. I do know that this is an accurate paraphrase. During the Great Depression, the government had economists working for it who created economic theory that government expenditure equals economic expansion. So the more government goes into debt, the hotter the economy can run, the more exchange of goods and services there is, the more the government can collect in taxes. The last 100 or so years has really proven that to be exactly true. If you spend money as a government, your economy heats up, you generate more in taxes. The more you generate in taxes, the more you can spend as a government, and then therefore the more your economy heats up. It is similar to large business spending. If you look at the budgeting and spending process of a large business, it would baffle most people who run a regular everyday budget, because in large business spending, you don't spend based on what you have, you spend based on what you hope to generate. So the government did an experiment. They created the New Deal. They outlaid what was up to that point the largest amount of money that the US government had ever outlaid. They outlaid more money than any other government in the entire world had ever outlaid into their economy. And we had these arguments. We had these arguments then, the same arguments that we're having now. You know, this will tether future generations to a debt so insurmountable that they won't be able to pay it back. This will create a slave system again in America. This will cause our economy to collapse from the burden of servicing this debt. All disingenuous arguments, because the people arguing these things aren't stupid. They know what it's like to spend this way. That's how how people like the Rockefellers became insanely wealthy. And these disingenuous arguments just created fear and pushback against this spending that was absolutely necessary. So fast forward a couple of years, and we started paying back that debt as a country. We serviced that debt for a little while. Think of it like, hey, I got a credit card. I spent a little bit of money on it, and instead of paying off the credit card, I paid the minimums. You'll never get out of debt that way, but your creditors are happy. Well, America has been paying that credit card debt and paying those minimums ever since then. We've never paid off that debt. We haven't even made a tiny little debt in it. That debt has continued to exist. It will continue to exist. Uh, it will never go away. We will never pay it off. And the reason we will never pay it off is because now that previously huge amount of money is irrelevant. It's less than the funding that we give to our least liked programs. It's less than we give to probably dry cleaning. Interesting sidebar fun fact. The amount of the Philadelphia Cultural Fund being fully funded is less than what the Philadelphia PD spends on dry cleaning every year. So yeah, hey PPD, why don't you do your own dry cleaning and then we could fund the arts. Anyway, so yeah, we'll never pay off that debt. The thing is that economies snowball. If you create more economic motion, there's more spent, there's more opportunity for taxation. The taxation comes back to the government spends more money. Without taxation and without government spending, societies fail. We founded this country as a tax revolt, and the founders quickly realized that regardless of the fact that they didn't want to pay taxes, that you can't just have a government without paying taxes. People need skin in the game. Anyway, so that's where we are with that. It's we need to spend more on the arts again. We need to spend money so that the economy of Philadelphia can recover. The economy of Philadelphia can continue to operate, and so people can have jobs. I'm an employer. I employ people to do things like shoot video and operate cameras, do reporting, do video switching, install things places. In order to do that, I need people to buy things from me. In order to have people buy things from me, things need to be happening that people want to do. In order to have things happen that people want to do, to be entertained, that part of the economy needs money in it. These knock-on effects just won't go away, not without the government actually doing what it's supposed to do and protecting people. Another side of this, and I had an interesting conversation last night with Michael O'Brien, who's an activist and artist here in Philadelphia, but he does most of his work nationally. And we're going to be talking a little bit more. I hope to have him on the coffee break chat. But we were talking about the fact that Philadelphia is going to get money back from the CARES Act. So, sorry, I'll pull this all into context. The CARES Act created not only the stimulus checks, the FPUC, the PUA, the unemployment programs. It also created block grants for the states. And pretty much all the states decided to use the block grants in the same way. They created programs to help people with rent and help people with their mortgage. By the way, just another random aside, Pennsylvania's governor, Tom Wolf, has waived the deadlines for the rental relief and mortgage relief programs in Pennsylvania. If you haven't applied for rent relief or haven't applied for mortgage relief and your income was in any way affected by the pandemic, go apply today. Please do not wait. I work for a company that helps with the applications, and we received such a rush before the deadline on September 30th that we weren't able to help everybody. Luckily, the deadline got extended, but there's no reasoning or space for the deadline to get extended past November 4th, which is the new deadline. So please go apply today. This Pandemic Mortgage Assistance Program, PMAP, and the Rental Relief Program, RRP. You can find both information on both of those on the PHFA website. In Philadelphia, you can find rental relief in specific on phlrentassist.org. That's a website that was set up specifically for that program, specifically by the city of Philadelphia. Other counties in the rent assist programs are all run by the counties. The mortgage relief program is run by the state. So there's one site for mortgage relief, and that's pmap.phfa.org. There are multiple sites for rental relief, so look up RRP or rental relief on your county's government website. This applies to the rest of the U.S. as well. There's, like I was saying, pretty much every state has these rental and mortgage relief programs. So they were created out of block grants. Block grants are basically money the federal government gives to a state, and they say, here's a bunch of money, spend it on helping people out that were affected by the pandemic. And then the state figures out how to do that. Well, there's not a lot of creativity in government, so a lot of the states chose to do exactly the same thing. They created rental relief programs and they created mortgage relief programs. The money from the CARES Act came with a string. It all has to be spent by December 31st, 2020. On January 1st, 2020, the states have to write a check back to the federal government giving them back any of the money from the CARES Act that they didn't spend. Well, I don't know how many of you are too young to know what Brewster's Millions is, but it's basically the same thing. You're going to find a way to spend that money. If not, watch Brewster's Millions. Great movie. Richard Pryor in his prime. Really excellent story. Some little problems with it, but it still holds up today. And I swear to crap that Donnie keeps digging into the well of old Hollywood scripts to come up with his plans for the next thing he's going to do, because I see parallels between everything that the Trump administration does in the last 40 years of entertainment and media. Maybe that's just because I follow entertainment and media so much. Anyway, so because they have to return the money on January 1st, the states are trying to spend it. So they created a deadline of November 31st for the counties to use those block grants. So the mortgage relief program and the rental relief programs all have a spending deadline. In other words, they have to give the money to the landlords or the banks by November 30th. Any of that money that wasn't used, that was set aside for those programs, will then go back to the state, and the state is automatically going to divvy that up between the counties. The counties will receive a block grant similar to how the state received a block grant, and they'll be able to spend it however they want, but within the realms of assisting people because of effects of COVID. So there is a high probability, because of lack of participation in both the rental relief and the mortgage relief programs, that the county of Philadelphia, which is also the city of Philadelphia, it's the same thing, will be getting a large lump sum of money on December 1st. Also, interesting to note, if you like participatory government, a lot of the hearings and city council listening sessions, stuff like that, a lot of their negotiations around mid-year reallocation of budget will be happening in November and December. This is a mechanism in Philadelphia. The city can reallocate budget in the middle of the year. They can look at how programs are spending money and determine whether or not they need all the money that was originally budgeted to them, if they need more money, if they need less money, excuse me, that kind of thing. And so they're going to be doing that in November and December. Well, here's where we come to lobbying. I spend a lot of time talking to city council. I spend a lot of time talking to our government because this is a participatory democracy. Excuse me. They don't know what you want unless you tell them. And we told them en masse during the original budget negotiations that we wanted people to be able to have funding for the arts and to defund the Philadelphia Police Department. Granted, it's not as simple as that, but to the extent that City Council could respond to that request, they feel that they did. A lot of folks who work in economics and budgeting feel that they could have done a bit better. I won't have, too much of an argument about that right now, just because it's pointless. It's been done. So now let's move on. So the moving on is the reallocation process. So we're going to get, we're going to take a look at the budget. We're going to take a look at how all the departments have spent their money, and we're going to move money around between departments in the middle of the year. And we're also going to be getting this block grant. Right now, there is a call to end violence, to help end violence. One of the biggest things Philadelphia as a city could do to end gun violence is to protect the people of the city of Philadelphia by making sure that they are secure in their housing, secure in their source of food, and secure in their ability to express themselves. People don't just randomly commit gun violence. People commit gun violence when they are insecure and afraid. The arts is a way to provide an outlet for people and to get people participating in society in such a way that they will not want to commit gun violence. And we need to take a look at initiatives that have been created to increase arts and increase arts funding in the city of Philadelphia to protect the city of Philadelphia from the lack of expression that is creating an environment of gun violence. People are afraid, and I want to directly address City Council via this broadcast, but also encourage everyone watching this broadcast, anyone who sees this broadcast, anyone who watches it later, 5 weeks from now, whatever. Contact your city government. Contact your local elected officials. Make it clear to them that just simply locking people up is not going to reduce gun violence. It's been shown time and again in study after study. Just putting people in jail doesn't do anything to change gun violence. Just locking people away, just making punishments for crimes more and more severe doesn't do anything to change violence. The only thing that changes violence is when you have opportunities that outweigh the citizens' desire to protect themselves through gun violence. So I will be lobbying City Council to spend more money on the arts. I encourage you to lobby City Council to spend more money on the arts. I will be lobbying City Council to defund the police department. The police department is solidly rooted in racism and sexism, and has pervasive veins of racism and history of racism throughout. It's time to reimagine the Philadelphia Police Department, to take policing to what it really needs to be, which is a service to the community rather than continuing to laud it as some sort of magic protector of the community. It isn't. Communities protect themselves. They're not protected by a strongman coming in from outside. So please contact your city council members. If you have any questions about how to be effective as an advocate, how to be effective as an organizer, feel free to reach out to me, and I may set up some sort of training for folks. I haven't figured that out yet. I've been asked by a couple of people if we could set up a training, and I think that's a good idea, but that's neither here nor there. We'll look at it as the weeks pass. Anyway, the moral of the story is participate in government. If you have your ballot, I didn't bring mine up today. I was going to show people, but if you have your ballot, vote on it, put it in the secrecy envelope, put it in the mailing envelope, sign the mailing envelope, fill out your return address, stick it in the mail, stick it in a drop box, or take it to your county elections board office and drop it off. And with that, it's 11:01. I'm gonna end this broadcast. Really appreciate you all for watching. I know an hour of watching me blather on is probably too boring for most folks, but hopefully you've made it this far. If you have made it this far, please support independent media. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/LightThiefProductions. It's all pushed together, patreon.com/LightThiefProductions. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/LightThiefProductions, or subscribe to our Facebook page. You'll get notices every time we go live, facebook.com/LightThiefProductions. And if you'd like to be a guest, if you'd like to talk about anything from a minority perspective, if you'd like to offer your opinion, if you'd like to promote something that you have coming up, please feel free to get in touch with us, submissions@light-thief.com. And I hope to see you all again next week. Really appreciate you watching. Have a good one.